Hello guys, good afternoon everyone. Welcome back to online classes at APPA Public School. Okay, dear students, in the previous class we discussed or we shall studied about the chapter French Revolution and its introduction part. Yes, and today we are going to continue the next part of this chapter, that is the outbreak of the revolution. Yes, it means how the revolution begins. So, which was the major spark? Which was the major spark for this revolution? Yes, okay. See, before to go for this part, we will glance over on what we discussed in the earlier class. Yes. Okay. See, as I told you, on 14th July, yes, on 14th July 1789, what happened? On 14th July 1789, the city of Paris was in the state of alarm. Why it was in the state of alarm? Because the king had commanded the troops to move into the city of Paris. Yes, the king had commanded the troops to move into the city of Paris, and some of the rumors were spread that king he would soon order the troops to fire on the gathered people. Yes, so when heard about that, some of the 7,000 men, yes, some of the 7,000 men and women who were gathered in front of the town hall, yes, they gathered in front of the town hall and decided to form a what? Decided to form a people's militia. For what? To fight against the king. Yes. And see, they formed a people's militia and they began to break down the number of government buildings only in search of what? Only in search of arms or equipments which were required to fight against the king. Yes. And we discussed that later. Several hundred group, yes, several hundred group, they marched towards to the move towards to the eastern part of the city of Paris, and they stormed into the fortress prison. Yes, fortress prison called Bastille. The prison name is. They stormed into the Bastille. They stormed into the Bastille and they killed the commander of a Bastille and released the home. They released the prisoners from there. And even we discussed that in the year of 1774, what happened? In the year of 1774, the Louis XVI, yes, Louis XVI, yes, the Louis XVI, who belongs to an Bourbon family. Yes, who belongs to an Bourbon family, ascended the throne of France. Means he became a king of France. And during that time, he was only how many years old? 20 years old. Yes, during that time, he was only 20 years old and he got married to the Austrian princess Mary Antoinette. Yes, Mary Antoinette. Okay. See, when King Louis XVI became a king of France, during that time, the long years of war had drained the financial resource of the France. So that reason, under Louis XVI, France helped the 13 American colonies to gain independence from Britain. So it was highly impossible to support them free of cost. So that reason the war added a billion of livres and later it had been risen to the 2 billion livres. Yes, debt. And the lenders who gave a state credit began to charge interest on the loans. Interest on the loans. To meet its regular expenses such as a maintaining cost of army, court, running the government offices and universities, the state began to impose or the state forced to increase in the taxes. So when they began to increase in the taxes, during this time the society was divided into three estates. The French society divided into three estates. First is a clergy, second is a nobility, and third is a third estate, which it includes the lawyers, doctors, peasants, artisans, small businessmen, agriculturalists, and etc. So which it was included. Yes. And even see here, peasants made up about a 90% of the population, not a clergy and nobility. Peasants were made up about the 90% of the population, and however, only few of them, yes, only few of them owned their small plot of land where they cultivated. And about 60% of the land, as I told you, is about 60% of the land was owned by the home, about owned by the noble and church and other richer member of the third estate. Yes, and the first two estate, clergy and nobility. Yes, clergy and nobility were exempted. paying a taxes to the state government or to the state, and even they were enjoying the privileges by birth. Even so peasants and artisans were rendered services to the home, services to the nobility clergy people under their construction of a building, construction of a roads, construction of a drainages, and etc. But they were not ready to provide a service or a job or a work to those peasants or the artisans. Yes. So during this time, yes, so these are the things what we discussed in the earlier class. And not only this, even there were two kinds of a or two types of a taxes. One is a tithes, second is a tithe. Yes, tithes, it was collected by the home, it was collected by the church as a 1/10 of agricultural produce. Yes, and tithe, it is a direct kind of a tax where they had to directly pay to the state. Finally, all the tax were borne by the home or paid by the home, paid by the third estate people. And during 1715, yes, during 1715, the population of the France was 23 million. But by the 1789, it increased to 28 million. Yes. So as the population increased, the demand means the rapid increase of food grain also began to increase. Yes. So this is what we discussed. And even say during this time, three major philosophers who played an important role. Those three major philosophers, first is a John Locke, yes, who proposed a book called Two Treatises of the Government. Second, J.J. Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, yes, who proposed a book called The Social Contract. And third, Montesquieu, who proposed a book called The Spirit of Laws. Yes, see, these three major philosophers' ideas were began to be discussed in a where? Began to be discussed in the saloon shops, coffee shops, began to be printed in the newspapers, magazines, and etc. Yes, so these are the things what we discussed in the earlier class. And today we are going to continue the next part of this chapter, that is outbreak of the what? Outbreak of the revolution. How the revolution begins. Okay, so here in the previous class, we discussed how the Louis XVI increased in the taxes and why did he increase in the taxes? Yes, why did he increase in the taxes? Okay, see here in France, in the old administration or old regime also we can call. Yes, in France, in the old administration, in the old administration, the king or monarch also we can see. Yes, in the France, in the old administration, the monarch did not have a power to impose the tax. Yes, the monarch did not have a, yes, the monarch did not have the power to impose the taxes according to his will alone. So rather he had to call a meeting. Yes, rather he had to call a meeting to the Estate General, which would then possible or which would then possible to pass a proposal for the new taxes. Yes, okay. Shall I give a small example of it? For example, we people are working under principles, yes or no? So here the first is a principal, our boss. Yes. So these principals are working under management. Yes or no? So here we are the what? We are the teachers. Yes. Do we have any rights to take our own decisions? No. So we have to take a decision by the help or with the permission of a principal, sir. Yes or no? So here also the same situation. What? See, in the France in the old administration, the monarch did not have a power to impose the will according to his will alone. Yes, according to his will alone. See, same way, the principal also should ask the home, should ask the teachers to implement this or not to implement this. Yes, then it shows that here, the monarch did not have a power to impose the tax according to his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting for the Estate General, which would then possible to pass the proposal for a new taxes. And see, here the Estate General was a political body. This Estate General was a political body to which three estates sent their representatives. Three estates sent their representatives. And see, however, the monarch could alone decide when to call a meeting for this body. When to call a meeting for this body. And the last meeting was called in the year of 1614. Yes. The last meeting was called in the year of 1614. And when was the next meeting called? Yes, the last meeting was called in the year of 1614. The next meeting, so here on 5th May, on 5th May 1789. Yes, on 5th May 1789, Louis 16th. Yes, Louis 16th. Louis, what Louis 16th? On 5th May 1718, Louis 16th called an together assembly to State General. Yes, on 5th May 1789, Louis XVI called a together assembly to a State General to pass a proposal for the new taxes. Yes, to pass a proposal for the what? To pass a proposal for the new taxes. Yes, and see, a resplendent hall means a famous hall. Yes, or the big hall also we can see. Yes, a resplendent hall in Versailles was ready to host the delegates. Means was ready to welcome the delegates. Means a representatives. So here, a resplendent hall in Versailles was ready to host the delegates. And here, the first and second estate. See, this is the most important point. The first and second estate had sent their 300 representatives each. Then 300 representatives of first estate. Yes. Then second estate. 300 plus 300, 600. Yes. The first and second estate had sent their 300 representatives each, who were seated in a rows, facing each other on two sides. See, facing each other on two sides. So here 300 and here 300. And here in between king. Yes or no? You might have seen the court of a king's court. Yes. So here the first and second estate had sent their 300 representatives each, who were seated in a rows facing each other on two sides, while 600 representatives, yes, while 600 representatives of third estate had to stand at the back of first and second estate. So 300 here and 300 here. Then total 3 plus 3, 600 here and 600 here. Then total 1200 representatives. Yes, see, 300 representatives of a first estate and second estate, 600 representatives of a third estate. Then total 1200 representatives were present in a king's court. Yes. Okay, and see here, peasants, artisans, and women's. Yes, peasants, artisans, and women were denied entry to the assembly. Means they were not allowed to the assembly. However, or but their grievances means problems. Yes. However, their grievances and demands were listed in a 40,000 letters. Yes, their grievances and demands were listed in a how many letters? 40,000 letters, which have been brought by the whom? Which have been brought by the representatives or third estate representatives. Yes, the representatives. And see, this is how they called a meeting. Not only this, see, and voting in the estate general, yes, voting in the estate general in the past have been conducted, yes, have been conducted according to the principle of each estate had one vote. Each estate had a one vote, and this time too, Louis XVI decided to determine the same, or this time too, Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice that each estate had one vote. But the members of the third estate, yes, but the members of the third estate demanded that, this third estate demanded that now voting will be conducted, or now voting should be conducted as a whole, but each member would have a one vote. This was a critical situation for the King Louis XVI, because the Louis XVI determined to continue the same practice what they conducted in the past. But now the member of the third estate demanded that now voting is conducted by the assembly as a whole, but each member would have a one vote. Yes, see, this kind of a principle was given by one of the famous philosophers of France, that J.J. Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, in his book Social Contract. Yes, a famous philosopher who already mentioned, yes, the relationship between representatives and peoples. Yes, so here, what the third estate, member of the third estate demanded that now the assembly will be conducted as a whole by the assembly. Yes, by meeting will be conducted by the assembly, but each member would have a one vote. But the king rejected their proposal. When the king rejected their proposal, means third estate proposal, when the king rejected their proposal, the member of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. So when you did not ready to obey us, then what is the use of sitting in the court's hall? So that reason what they did, the member of the third estate walked out from the assembly in protest. We want justice. Like this. In protest, they started moving, or they went out from the assembly. And they did not sit quiet. Yes. On 20th June, yes, on 20th June, what happened? On 20th June, these members, or all of them, were gathered in the indoor tennis court ground of Versailles. They gathered in the indoor tennis court ground of Versailles. Yes, and they declared themselves a national assembly. We got freedom. Yes, they declared themselves as a what? As a national assembly, and they promised or swear. Yes, they promised not to disperse till they draft a constitution to the France, and that would limit the power of a monarch or the king also, we can say. Yes, that would limit the what? That would limit the power of the whom? That would limit the power of the monarch. That's it. Yes. And say this movement was led by two famous people. Yes, who are those? First is a Mirabeau and Abbe Sias. Yes, Abbe Sias. So this movement was led by the whom? Mirabeau and Abbe Sias. See, Mirabeau, he was born in a noble family. Yes, Mirabeau, he was born in a noble family, but he supported to the common people or member of the third estate people. And see, Mirabeau, he brought out a big journal. Yes, he brought out a big journal and delivered a powerful speech in front of the gathered people at an indoor tennis court ground. Yes, he delivered a powerful speech to the peoples who were gathered in the indoor tennis court ground at Versailles. And Abbasius, he prepared or he started what? Printing up pamphlets. Yes, Abbasius, originally he was a priest and asked the question, yes, wrote an influential pamphlet called What is the Third Estate? He mentioned that what is the third estate. See, here during this time, while the National Assembly was busy at Versailles, drafting a constitution to the France, the others were seated with a turmoil. What seated with the turmoil? Because, see here, during the time, a severe winter was also attacked. And during this time, the women were standing in front of the bakery in a long queue for the diet food called bread. Yes, they were standing in a queue of long hours in front of the what? In front of the bakeries. After spending hours, yes, spending hours in a long queues at the bakery, they stormed into the bakery shops and destroyed the things whatever in the baker's shops. Then by saying this situation, the king commanded the troops to move into the city of Paris. Yes, so on 14th July, the agitated crowd were in the indoor tennis court ground. Yes, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the Bastille. Yes, destroyed the Bastille. Not only this, even in the countryside, the rumors were spread about this. Yes, spread village to village or in the countryside, village to village, that a lots of a lots of manure here village, that lots of manure was hired, bands of brigands. Yes, hired bands of brigands means robbers. Bands of whom? Bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the ripe crops. Destroy the ripe crops. Not only the crops, even they were began to attack on the chautex of France officials. Chautex of France officials, and they began to destroy the what? Began to destroy or burning the documents of land records. Yes. So when all these things taking place, yes, all things taking place. See, here Louis XVI accepted the National Assembly, he pretended accepting as a what? National Assembly. See here, Louis XVI finally what? Agreed to the Constitution, yes, or recorded recognition of a National Assembly. That the principle of that would limit the power of the monarch. Yes, that would limit the power of what? That would limit the power of the monarch. On yes, on 4th August at night. Yes, 4th August night, 1789, the Assembly passed an resolution, or the Assembly passed a decree abolishing the decree that abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes. And even not only these, even the members of the first estate and second estates were given privileges or were lost their privileges enjoyed by birth. They were taken back. Yes, see, of the clergy too were forced to give up their privileges. As a result, the government acquired assets of worth at least 2 billion livres. Yes, 2 billion livres from whom? First estate and second estate and other richer member of the third estate who were supporting to the first estate and second estate. Yes, who were supporting to them. Finally, in the year of 1791, yes, see, yes, what happened? In the 1791, the National Assembly completed the drafting of a constitution to the France. And during this time, there was a critical situation for the makers of constitution, that how to do this. So these powers, instead of being rest in one hand, they divided the power among the three major organs of the government, that legislature, executive and judiciary. And later here the citizens were divided into two categories. One is the active citizen and second is the passive citizen. Active citizens, men were considered as active citizens and women were considered as what? Passive citizens above the age of 25. Yes, active citizens above the age of 25, they will get a right to vote. And not only this, the constitution later, yes, the constitution began with the declaration of the rights of man. And those are also called as inalienable rights. Also called as a what? Inalienable rights. So here, rights such as a right to life, right to freedom, yes, right to freedom, and right to freedom of speech, right to freedom of opinion, right to freedom of equality before the law began to be introduced in the France constitution. So from this way, who the French people got a right to vote, right to freedom of rights, right to freedom of speech, right to freedom of opinion, and etc. Finally, they got a what? Freedom here. But still, the question mark that the France abolishes the monarchy. How it was? See, as I told you, there finally Louis XVI agreed to the National Assembly, but he did not still agree to the National Assembly. Means just he pretended to escape from that situation. Later he once again started a what? fight or a war against them, against this. Yes. So this is what the outbreak of revolution means, how the revolution begins. Yes. Okay, yes, I hope everyone understood. And the next part, France abolishes monarchy and become a republic, will continue in the next class. I hope everyone understood this. And here, some of the symbols were given. Some of the symbols were given, which you have to make a list among yourself. For example, page number 12 and 13. Just the symbols were given and what the symbol represents. You have to draw it and you have to write what the symbol represents, and you have to submit it to me. Yes. Okay. So this is what the outbreak of revolution. First part is the most introduction part, that 1774 Louis XVI. Just we will glance short on this part. And today we discuss that the outbreak of revolution, how it was started. Yes, in the old administration, yes, in the France, in the old administration, the monarch did not have a power to impose the tax according to his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting for the home. Rather, he had to call a meeting for the Estate General, which would enable to pass a proposal for the new taxes. Yes, and the Estate General was a political body sent there three what representatives to the assembly, and however monarch only could decide when to call a meeting of this body, and the last meeting was called, yes, in the year of 1614. Yes, the last meeting was called in the year of 1614, and the next meeting was called when on 5th May 1718 by Louis XVI. Yes, called a together assembly to the Estate General. For what reason? To pass a proposal for the new kind of taxes, or to pass a proposal for the new taxes. And who were present in the assembly? See, the first and second estate had sent their 300 representatives each, who were seated in a rows. Yes, who were seated in a rows facing each other on two sides. On two sides, while 600 members of the third estate had to stand at the back of these first and second estate representatives. Yes, and who were denied to entry into the assembly? Peasants, artisans, and women. But their problems and what demands were listed in how many letters? Listed in a 40,000 letters. Listed in a 40,000 what? 40,000 letters. Yes, 40,000 letters which had been brought by the representative. And what happened here? The Estate General or voting in the Estate General in the past had been conducted according to the principle of each estate had one vote. So clergy one vote, then nobility one vote, then third estate one vote. Only how many votes? 3 votes. And Louis XVI decided to continue the same practice too. Yes. But the member of the third estate demanded that now the voting conducted by the assembly as a whole, but each member would have a one vote. Then total how many votes? 600, 1200 votes. 1200 votes. But the king rejected their proposal. When the king rejected their proposal, these people, yes, they walked out from the assembly in a protest. Yes, walked out assembly in a protest. Means they were not ready to attend the assembly. Then not only they walked out from the assembly in a protest, even they gathered on 20th June. Yes, they gathered on 20th June at an indoor tennis court ground at a Versailles. Yes, and they declared themselves as a what? National Assembly, and decided or promised not to disperse till they drafted a constitution to the France. That would limit the power of whom? That would limit the power of a monarch. And this movement was led by the two famous people, that Mirabeau and Abbé Sieyès. So Mirabeau, he was born in a noble family and he supported the whom? A member of the third estate or the common people. Yes, and he brought out a big journal and delivered a powerful speech in front of the gathered people. And Abbé Sieyès, who was originally a priest, and printed a pamphlet or influential pamphlet called What is Third Estate. So these are the things what we discussed in the today's class. And in the next class, we will go for the next part of this chapter, that is France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. I hope everyone understood. If you have any kind of doubts, we will clarify your doubts by the evening today's session, that is EFCC session. And please, tomorrow, if possible, in the next class, I am going to give a questions based on the part. Yes, based on the part. Already a few questions were given based on the part itself. But now I'm planning to give a worksheet based on the part. If possible, 100% I will give a worksheet. If not possible, I will give at least a question based on the what? Based on these parts. Okay? Okay. We will have what? The clarification session evening. Please try to attend the evening FCC session. That is also most important because sometimes we are going to give some important messages to over there. Please try to attend the class, both video class and as well as a FCC session. Okay. I hope everyone understood. Thank you. Have a nice day.